Hello and welcome to Monocle on Culture. I'm Robert Bounds. On today's show, we're meeting two figures in the cultural world known both for their creative practice as well as their brave attitude towards speaking truth to power. We'll hear from one of Poland's preeminent film directors, as well as a Russian musician and conceptual artist who happens to lead a world-famous feminist collective / punk band. I'll leave you guessing as to which one. Do stay tuned. That's all ahead on Monocle on Culture. First up, we speak with the Polish film director Agnieszka Holland, a practitioner with a long track record of making films that look history's starkest times in the eye. Europa looked at the plight of Europe's Jews in the Second World War, a woman alone at life under communism. Her latest, Green Border, looks at migration through Europe via the story of Syrian refugees tricked into landing in Belarus by Alexander Lukashenko's slippery rhetoric. They immediately become political footballs for the Belarusian and Polish border authorities to kick under and over barbed wire border fences by guards reared on hard-bitten indoctrination and neighbourly rivalry. Holland's film is a spellbinding, sad and outrageous story that looks at the border through the eyes of the Syrians, a charitably inclined activist and one of the Polish border guards involved. Shot in black and white and focused on the sometimes swampy, occasionally beautiful forest setting of that border, Holland teases out a protagonist's stories with patience, tenderness and style, but also with a stern eye on the effects that polarising politics has on people. Here is my conversation with Agnieszka Holland. Agnieszka, I wanted to ask you first about the story for Green Borders, whether it's an amalgamation of sadly all too familiar stories of refugees and migrants, or whether it's a specific story, because one of your characters refers to a Polish newspaper quite a lot in the film, and I wondered whether it was perhaps taken from a newspaper story.
It is a mix of the stories. No one particular story wasn't literally translated to the film's character. The closest was the woman played by Behi Ajani, who is an Afghan English teacher. And in reality, that woman was Iraqi Kurdish English teacher, but very similar kind of the person, and with a terrible experience over several pushbacks on the border, and with very strong voice about it. And I was watching my activist recorded the long interview with her when she was in the hospital in Poland. And actually, she inspired me to write that character. And the Syrian family is more generic. It means we took stories from several Syrian refugees. There are many, many stories, and they are quite similar one to other. And the activist is the same. So it was like that, the different stories came, but we did really very extended research and very rich research in terms of the sources, the refugees, the activists, the local people who are not the activists, but who are the witness to the situation. Even some border guards was ready to talk to us, of course, anonymously. So they told very interesting and very dramatic stories from their perspective.
You had to be plucky to get there as a journalist. It's another conflict. It's another area of political strife, Agnieszka. It seems not covered enough by the media in a strange way, despite the fact that it's used by politicians as a political stick to beat people with. It's actually, there aren't many photographs of this, for example, many reports of this. And I wondered, I know that listening to you talking about this film on another radio program, in fact, you talked about making images that people didn't want made. And I guess this is a story that certain politicians in certain countries, certainly perhaps Poland and Belarus, didn't want made. Could you expand on that and tell us about what it's like to be pushing against a closed door as a film project?
Well, the journalists are in very difficult situation right now because we are all living, you in UK and we in Poland, United States, France now, and other countries in very polarized countries and states. And the journalists are the first, maybe not the first victims, they are the victims to that situation because their main goal is not to tell that it means describe the truth and investigate and then report the facts, but somehow, to serve one or other political agenda. And they are doing that first by the convictions, I believe, but second by opportunistic pulsion, by the fear. The world is so black and white. The fear is that if we will attack our side, we will helping others, and they, if will win over our side, it will be even worse. So we are accepting from our side the most outrageous behavior, to not to give the bullets to the enemy. In that moment, the very, very reason of the independent journalism is on stake. And I think we are actually, I feel for some time that we are in very similar situation like in 30s of 20th century. And with the adding, the modernity and the new technical and technological inventions and the internet revolution and social media and so on, and now artificial intelligence. So suddenly now we have the tools Hitler and Stalin didn't have, having only written press and radio. But even with the small tool they had, they've been very efficient for some time. And now, I don't know what will gonna happen. But anyway.
So you are making a parallel. You're sort of saying that those current government, we shouldn't push these right-wing governments into being accused of fascism. But nonetheless, there are similarities between 1930s and early 1940s in Europe and what you're seeing now, and what you've made this film about. And obviously, a lot of your
similarities also in that the liberals and Democrats in 30s were thinking that it means taking as their own at least the important parts of fascist agenda. They can win with the fascists, and of course it's totally stupid. It means not only it's morally wrong, but also it is totally non-efficient.
I wanted to ask Agnieszka how you prepared your cast for this film. What is very effective is taking the Syrian refugees' point of view. We see their story. We see their story also through the prism of a border guard. We see it through these activists, the people that are trying to help them in the forest on the border between Poland and Belarus. I'd love to know about your decision to frame it that way, and I'd love to know how you prepared your cast for some tough scenes.
We've been hesitating, what approach to have. If we will focus on one particular moment, one time, one place, or if it will be more epical vision. And I decided that because the situation is very complex, and because it will be the first film made about that issue and maybe the last, we want to try to, to give that multiple perspective. So those 3 points of views I found essential. The refugees, it was obvious, because my immediate reaction when I've seen the propaganda who was totally dehumanizing those people and using all possible racist stereotypes, to present them as weapons of evil, that I have to give to them the voices and faces, that they have to rehumanize them somehow. And to do so, I had really to study a lot. And also, it was very important to me to have the cast which is true to their origins, to have the Syrian people playing Syrian, and the main two actors, the father and the grandfather, are Syrian refugees. It means they are professional actors and very gifted, but in the same time they've been fleeing Syria with the danger of death.
Yeah, and I was going to say, they presumably are quite invaluable. You've obviously done a huge amount of research. This is a territory about which you know yourself as a director and as a Polish person. But these must have been very direct these particular actors from the Middle East must have been able to give you a lot of advice on how real that situation is, I suppose.
Yeah, before we started shooting, we had several meetings, and especially Jalal have been analyzing the script and giving me some notes and ideas, and I expected it. I wanted to be infused with the cultural reality and very specific moments of the experience. So it was very helpful, and they've been very engaged, and they took that job not only as an acting gig, but also as some kind of the statement important for them. So that it was, we didn't have no conflicts, on the set, and everybody, we've been playing the same note. And among Polish actors, some of them, especially actress who is playing Julia, she is very active in the activism as well. It means she was helping the people on the border, and she was because she's famous actress in Poland, she became the spokeswoman for the refugees groups and so. And when I've been attacked by the nationalistic government in very violent ways, she was as well. And now it's some kind of the repetition of the similar propaganda with the new government, unfortunately. And we are attacked again, myself and she, the most.
This is under the new government in Poland, which we often think as under Donald Tusk's leadership. We feel that is often a more liberal outfit.
Donald Tusk decided, in my opinion, before European elections, to use the fear of the war and the fear of the refugees and the main tool to prove his efficiency. And he triggered quite terrible, I think, quite terrible propaganda. It means somehow, to me it's worse, because, when the liberals are taking the agenda of the nationalists and the populists, they are credibilizing that for the general population, because after you say, okay,
it makes it okay if someone like that does it, I suppose, right? For them to posture.
And what he's doing, he just he restored the closed zone, the zone forbidding people smaller than previous government, but still. And he pretends that he has the solution to the situation. He doesn't have the solution to the situation, but he realized that he can use the situation as a previous prime minister said, political gold. And one thing passed now, yesterday, it means that the soldiers are allowed to shoot to anybody on the borders, and practically they will be unpunished. It means the assumption is that the soldier was right when he was shooting.
Carte blanche.
Carte blanche. It means all the protection for the people who happen to be on that wall or next to the wall or in the forest gives you the permits to, any protection was practically disappearing, any legal protection.
Yeah. No, we see, this is the character of the border guard is who does go on a journey in the film. He's an amazingly effective character to have as the kind of tool, the instrument of the state, the instrument of the tough posturing of the state, I suppose. And we see him and his fellow young recruits in a meeting room being lectured by the captain of the border guards, or the high-ranking officer in the border guards, and telling them that these Syrians are, using classic hybrid warfare is a phrase that he uses that I wrote down from the film. In effect, they're political footballs, aren't they? These people. What is the phrase you used, Agnieszka? The turnbacks, or where they keep being shoved under the border fence from Belarus into Poland, back and forth like a ping pong ball. This speech that the captain gives to his recruits, the Polish border guards, that's an amazing piece of writing. How did you research that? How did you put that down on the page? Or maybe this is just the rhetoric used in some Polish media or Polish politics.
They made several statements and speeches, and press conferences, and we made some kind of the compilation of those most often used propaganda, demagogical arguments, mixing with some right arguments, and it's what they are doing. And unfortunately, as I said, the new government start to use exactly the same language.
Right. So it's very close to the bone, sadly. I wanted to ask you, obviously, about the look of the film. You shoot it, apart from the title sequence in black and white. That gives it a historical echo somehow. It's also very beautiful. And I wondered if I could ask you about the reason for shooting it in black and white, because you want it to be beautiful, but not too beautiful. I wonder how you do that.
We wanted to keep that documentary rawness, which of course has some aesthetics also, but it's not like fooling you with the beauty, with something which is too over aesthetic. So, that what you said, it means that historical echo. It was very strong. It is very strongly heard in that area, because the imaginary of the Second World War and the escaping Jews hiding in the forest is so similar to what is going on now, that the people who are living there, or the activists coming from Warsaw or Krakow, they have impression that they've been transferred in the time back into the past, and they are using the similar words for what's going on. Also the tracks, when you pack the people to the truck and take to some unknown destination, and they are actually after beaten and tortured, and telling them that they are going to Germany or something. It is many things which I don't know if voluntary and underconsciously are repeated after, those 80 years, how much it passed.
I wanted to ask you, just finally in that case, don't take this the wrong way, but I wondered if making this sort of film becomes less easy, funding a film, producing a film like this becomes less easy because of the subject matter and because of that sort of the feeling of the door closing on so many liberal attitudes in Europe, and therefore the funding of these films.
It is very difficult to finance the films of that kind, I think. Maybe documentary a bit easier, because the people are expecting that documentary can touch the most controversial issues. But the feature film, which is more costly mostly, and needs some funding, some state fundings first in Europe, so that it was impossible in my case from Poland. But we got some funding from Czech Republic, France, and Belgium. As long as it will be not taken by right-wing governments, I think that institutions will be less or more independent. But we had also the refusal from several countries to help us. So, and it's impossible to go to the platforms, because the platforms know that with the polarization of the states, we are touching the subject like that, we are automatically losing 50-60% of the potential viewers. So they don't want to invest into that. So, it is a challenge, but in the same time, I think we have too many films which are totally useless, which are not courageous, neither artistically, neither commercially, neither in terms of the substance. So it's my life, the cinema, for 60 years. So I cannot, because I decided when I was 15 what I want to do, that now just not to try to tell the story which I found important or crucial. It will be the betrayal to myself.
That was the filmmaker Agnieszka Holland, and Green Border is out in cinemas now. Now, Russia's feminist punk collective Pussy Riot became world famous when they staged their celebrated, some say scandalous, performance in Moscow's biggest Orthodox church in 2012, imploring no less than the Virgin Mary to rid Russia of Vladimir Putin. The performance resulted in a 2-year jail term for Pussy Riot leaders Nadya Tolokonnikova and Maria Alyokina. After her release, Tolokonnikova continued doing performances and music videos with Pussy Riot, aimed at exposing the culture of repression and authoritarianism in Russia and elsewhere. But in recent years, she's also started dabbling in visual arts, and now some of her artworks are on display at the OK Linz in Austria's third city. These include reimagined Orthodox icons, as well as bottles of Putin's ashes from when she burned the Russian president's portrait in a Nevada desert. Monocle's Alexei Korolyov went along to experience the show for himself and to speak with Tolokonnikova.
This room, number 1, is called Rage Chapel. And I wanted to have this church-like feeling. And this neon piece means riot. I use Cyrillic calligraphy called vyaz, something from the 13th century. Usually it's used in religious settings. We were arrested for 2 years for performing at the Cathedral of Christ the Savior. So I'm just reclaiming it back because I'm really obsessed with the aesthetics. I don't belong to Orthodox Church. I don't belong to any organized religion, but I love metaphysics.
In late February 2012, 5 young women walked into the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in central Moscow, the seat of the Russian Orthodox Church. Once inside, they slipped on multicolored balaclavas and, alternately high-kicking and kneeling, broke into song, or rather, into a punk prayer. Virgin Mary, drive Putin out. The protest lasted a mere 40 seconds before church security hauled them away. And that might have been the end of it. But later that day, the women, members of the feminist punk band Pussy Riot, put the video of their performance online. Within months, 2 of them, Nadya Tolokonnikova and Maria Alochina, were sentenced to 2 years in prison. Their performance and their trial instantly made Pussy Riot a household name, both in Russia and the West, and their trademark balaclavas the headgear of choice for female protesters across the globe.
So I've been studying this vyaz, this calligraphy that's literally, if you translate it to English, would be something like knitting or like putting together letters in an ornament.
Tolokonnikova remains one of the group's leaders. In the years since her release from prison, she has also launched a media outlet focusing on human rights violations inside Russia's penal system, starred in the Netflix series House of Cards, and become an artist in her own right.
And this works, this is a triptych. It's called My Motherland Loves Me, and I Love My Motherland. It's obviously ironic because I'm on the every possible hit list in my country. I don't really think it really loves me, but you know, a lot of works here have this prayer-like meaning. So like when I create it, I almost like try to convince myself that that's how it is.
Rage, at the OK Linz Cultural Centre in Austria's third city, is Tolokonnikova's first solo museum exhibition. It's also the name of her last music video shot in Russia.
One of other works you see, Страха больше нет.
There's no more fear.
There's no more fear, or fear no more. I feel like it's impossible to get rid of fear once and for all, but you can convince yourself. And I think fear is not a very productive emotion. It really puts you in a cage of your own creation. And this is the ultimate wet dream of any authoritarian government, for you to self-censor, because then they don't have to do anything. They can enjoy using their money and power forever.
Have you felt more connection with this sort of medieval Russian church aesthetic since you've been out of Russia?
It's a good question. I think I've always was obsessed with it, and I would always come to churches. I think it started with my childhood, because my dad, he also does not belong to any organized religion, but he's very much into culture, like all aspects of culture. We would study architecture and music, and then religion, go to different buildings, different religious confessions. I think when I was in Russia, my love to this aesthetic was still as strong, but I didn't have to create it because I could just go to the church.
Yeah, it was there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the other room. So this was a performance piece where you burned a portrait of Putin, and these are the ashes from that burning.
That's right. This room is called Putin's Mausoleum. The original performance, Putin's Ashes, was held in August 2022, and it was one of my responses to full-scale invasion in Ukraine. I came together with women from Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, and we've created this performance. It was very important for me that people from these different countries who are somehow affected by Putin different ways came together. And with these ashes that we bottled, it's one of my first attempts to create physical art piece. And there is something powerful to the physical piece because, obviously we've always been exhibiting the video for our performances, but I started to feel like it's not enough. You also need the physicality. So we collected these Putin's ashes, and, like in Christianity, they say that if you believe strong enough, then wine turns into blood of Christ, and bread turns into body of Christ. And same thing here, if you believe strongly enough, eventually these Putin's ashes are going to turn into actual Putin's ashes.
On the second level of the exhibition, a giant model of a prison knife hangs over visitors' heads.
It's a knife, it's called Damocles sword. I guess the main meaning to me is this knife represents danger that not only people who are living under authoritarian regime live in daily, but also, the original meaning of Damocles sword is the dictator himself. His life hangs on a thread because think about Putin, he put himself in a circle of enemies, really, and everyone who is supporting him now would gladly stab him in the back at any moment.
There are yet more prison knives on this floor, as well as a memorial to the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and a replica of Tolokonnikova's prison cell.
These aren't the actual dimensions of the cell that you were in.
It's not exactly accurate. In fact, it's probably 40% bigger than it should be. It looks a bit too luxurious to me. But it serves the purpose. It brings you to the atmosphere where hundreds of people who went against the war have to spend their every single day, and some of them are locked there for 25 years. And this whole installation is dedicated to Russian political prisoners.
Obviously, you've built a life for yourself. You've become successful and much more high profile in America and elsewhere. And you must realize that you do have this authority, for getting people together. Mm-hmm. Is it something that you feel comfortable with? Or would you rather be an earlier version of yourself where fewer people knew about you?
I had to answer a few questions from people who came for my artist talk about how do you feel about working with institutions. You started as underground, as punk, and I think it's just a normal passage of life. Those who were punks become establishment, and their ass is being kicked by someone else who comes in younger, где та молодая шпана, которая сотрет с лица земли. I think it's just a passage of time, and it's normal. I mean, I'm very troubled by 50, 60 years old people who are playing exactly the same role as they played when they were 18. I think you get more connections, you grow in movement, you grow in your own influence, hopefully, and there will be younger people who will come in and ask more radical questions. That's their job.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Спасибо.
For Monocle in Linz, I'm Alexei Korolyov.
And that is all for this week. My thanks to Alexei Korolyov for that. And the exhibition entitled Rage is on until the 20th of October. Monocle on Culture is produced by Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Steph Chungu. And Steph also edits the show. We'll be back at the same time next week. But until then, from me, Robert Bound, thanks for tuning in.